A lot of people will have a game that they grew up with, and in my case, the game that defined my childhood in both a good and bad way was Skylanders. For anyone who doesn't know, Skylanders was an action-adventure game released back in 2011, with the main gimmick being the toys that you had to buy in real life in order to use them in the game. You buy this little guy at Target, slap him onto a portal of power, and bam, he's in the game ready to do wacky shenanigans. Oh my god! Oh my god!
Headshot.
Skylanders Spyro's Adventure was the first out of many games to be released in this franchise, and if you recognize the name Spyro, that is because this game did use the character from the Spyro games to promote this one. From what I know, the reason that Spyro is on the front title and essentially a mascot was because of Activision, the publisher for Skylanders, wanting a game under the Spyro title, and the developers Toys for Bob was originally going to make a normal Spyro game, but eventually decided on taking a risk with a special genre of gaming called Toys to Life. These games worked by focusing on a separate product to buy that has an NFC chip that connects to the game directly on the console or through a special device that enables the use of whatever you bought to come to life, hence the name. In order to make a profit from Toys to Life, there had to be many types of toys available for purchase, and making such products isn't easy, with each figure being around $10 a pack, and having other types of packaging with a 3-pack and adventure packs being $25 to $30, and even the starter pack being $70 on release is kind of crazy, because that is $10 more than what a new game would have cost at that time. For the game that has touched the hearts of me, millions of people, and millions of dollars down the drain, I'd like to go over the entire franchise one at a time, starting with Skylanders Spyro's Adventure. I'll go over this game in a way that will give you guys the feeling of what it was like to play and experience this era by not only talking about the game itself, but some stuff that has happened a bit outside the game, as well as any interesting facts about the franchise during the time. So let's whip out the old portal and figures and let's get the ball rolling. Why is it in Japanese? Okay, so before we actually start, I do want to give a disclaimer that for this recording, I did choose to play the game in Japanese for a really weird and dumb reason. You see, Skylanders came out on a lot of platforms. However, the initial plan for the game was that it was going to be an exclusive release for the Wii, but when the developers eventually decided to go multi-platform, they needed to get another dev team to help port the game over to the rest of the systems. But in doing so, the other dev team, Expect Entertainment, made huge changes from the Wii version to the other consoles, such as having completely different graphics, music, and even some gameplay elements. A lot of people grew up with this version of the game. However, my first experience with Skylanders was with the Wii version, and I wanted to replay that for this video. But for some reason, my portal that I use does not work with the Wii version. So looking through other options, I eventually found out that there was a Wii U version of Spyro's Adventure, and it was essentially an upgraded version of the Wii. However, this only came out in Japan, and therefore is exclusively in Japanese, language and everything. Could I have just played the other versions in English for this video? Yeah, but I think completing a game in Japanese with little to no understanding is kind of funny, so that's exactly what I did. With that out of the way, getting into the game, you're immediately thrown into a cutscene with a floating head named Eon, who tells you about the world of Skylands and the darkness that's coming to take it over. Afterwards, you're thrown into the first level, which has a huge set of islands that's being destroyed by a hurricane. Here, you're introduced to Flynn and Hugo, who are essentially your guide for the game, helping you out on what to do. This is where the game finally starts. All you have to do is pick a character from your collection, put them on the portal, and watch them come to life. Playing the game isn't too hard, as it's really just a beat 'em up where you spam attacks to defeat enemies and reach the end of a level. But to be honest, there are some characters that do have interesting mechanics, like for example, Zap here can shoot shocks and dash in water, but shooting the water makes it conduct electricity that damages enemies, or how Stump Smash here can throw up small spike balls at the beginning, but eventually gets an ability to shoot an even bigger spike ball that you can smash down to make a bunch of smaller ones that can cover an area. While a lot of these abilities aren't technically complex by definition, the beauty comes from the ability to swap between characters on the fly, whether it be to solve a puzzle, fight in a better situation, or just because you feel like it. With our Skylander on our portal and in our game, we can actually start with the level, and this first level is honestly a pretty fine introduction to the series, giving you enough information on the majority of the mechanics of the game for both the main content and the extra stuff as well. They teach you how to unlock the gates, how to do the movement block puzzles, give you information on the elemental gates, inform you about collectible items, and show you how to use a jump pad. Yeah, surprisingly, you actually cannot jump normally and are required to use a jump pad in order to get the higher ground. In later games, you are able to jump using a button, but honestly, I gotta admit, this was kind of cool and a bit of a surprise that a game doesn't have a jump button, so it definitely took some time getting used to it. Also, over at the elemental gate, you can see here that you'll need a specific element to pass through it, right? That means in order to 100% this game, you're going to need at least one Skylander for each element. You do start off with 3 elements being water, tech, and magic, but that means you'll have to get at least 5 other characters, meaning with the $70 you forked over for the starter pack, you'll have to spend another $50 to clear the extra content, and that's if you're not counting or including the expansion pack. To be honest, this probably should have been a warning for some people, because if you think this is bad, wait until we get to the later games. But anyways, after the first level, you get some lore as to why everything happening is happening. And that's because of this little chud named Chaos. He's your typical villain, you know, wanting to rule Skylands, get rid of the light and overtake it with darkness. But you know what? He's our little chud villain, so he's okay in my book. I promise you, you'll get used to him over time. But currently, Chaos is very much evil. In his flashback, he summons his minions and attacks the core of light, and the Skylanders fight back and kicks his ass. But while losing, Chaos goes into Plan C and summons a 4-headed Hydra to nuke the core of light, sending everything into disarray and sending the Skylanders over to Earth. Yes, I am serious. That's part of the lore and the trailers as well. So in a way, you are a character in this game. Now for the rest of the game, the primary focus is to obtain a part of the core of light that contains each of the 8 elements that were scattered throughout the Skylands in order to restore the hub world and defeat Chaos. And honestly, that's all I can give you at this point. I did mention before that I played the entirety of Spyro's Adventure in Japanese, so that's probably my fault and the reason as to why I can't really understand the story. But from just the visuals I saw, the primary focus of the story was what I said, and I do technically have to give the story itself some praise. Yes, I couldn't understand a single word of what they were saying, and even if I did, it probably may have not been the best writing in all history. However, I do think it does a really good job as the first entry to the series. You, as a player, are also a character in the story, therefore having the game give you a sense of world building through the multiple characters along with the multiple lands and enemies corresponding to each of the elements is pretty amazing, because as you progress, you slowly gain a sense of determination knowing so many parts of the world, its characters, and how it's affected by the destruction of the core of light. Will I care about them? No! But at least I know that they exist, and if any future game brings them back, I'll know who they are, and I will get that sense of familiarity. If you really want to learn more about the story, I'll leave a link down below to either a let's play for the whole game or a video itself talking about the lore. But personally, I feel like I was able to get a good grasp from the story from what I can tell and remember. Now, with the story out of the way, we can finally get to the fatty part of the game, the gameplay. Despite Skylanders being in the genre of a beat 'em up, having a small lack of movement, and the game being overall simplistic, it surprisingly works. Every Skylander only starts up with 2 buttons to attack. With upgrades you can add later on, despite only having a few buttons to press, you can do very unique combos with it, and the game agrees as well because later on you can upgrade your characters in really cool ways. You have simple abilities that make your attack better. You even get combos you can do when you press a specific set of buttons. But the real kicker is the second half of the upgrades being the split paths between 2 playstyles, as well as the soul gem you can get by playing the game. After reaching the end of your base upgrades, there will be a choice to pick between 2 new paths of upgrades, with each of them revolving around a different playstyle. Using the starter characters as an example, for Spyro, you can have a choice between making his fireball better, eventually turning it into a flamethrower, or you can make his horn charge better if you prefer more close range, and it can make the horn bigger if you charge long enough. For Gill Grunt, you can improve either his harpoon or his water hose. And for Trigger Happy, you can either improve your gun or the pot of gold that you can throw. And after you pick a path and finish it, you'll be able to get one final ability as long as you got their soul gem. Throughout every level, there are multiple collectible items to get, with one set of items being a soul gem. This is what you'll need in order to get a character's final ability, and usually they're locked behind an area that requires an elemental gate or just overall hidden in general. When you get the soul gem, you can actually watch a video showcasing what the final ability is, and it's kind of cool, not gonna lie. For some people, it looks kind of simple because in total there's like around 10 abilities in total, but what makes it work is the variety of characters you can get, and each of them play pretty differently. At face value, they probably do look and act similar, but through upgrades that each Skylanders can get, they all become different and unique in their own way, and eventually would stand out to become someone's favorite. My personal favorite Skylander for this game is Chop Chop, mainly because of his playstyle with his sword, and I personally just like more melee characters over anything else. He also has a shield, which can genuinely block some hits from enemies, and oh my god, the amount of times that has actually helped is insane. As much as I like him though, I can't exactly main him, as in order to play this game properly, it is recommended to swap between characters and specifically elements. In Spyro's Adventure, there are a total of 8 elements that scatter between 32 characters, and while it's cool to collect everyone and see how each of them play, you honestly just need one character from each element to 100% the game. I have said earlier that it is kind of expensive, and concerning that you'll have to fork over some extra cash to play the game properly could be an issue, but the bigger issue expands beyond a simple elemental gate. There are actually some buffs that some elements have over others, with the biggest one being fire. In a later level near the end of the game, there's a segment where the lights go dark and you have to rely on a really small space to progress. However, inserting a fire Skylander and using any of their abilities would make the room light up around that fire attack. And you want to know something funny? A fire Skylander was not included in the starter pack, so in order to have this pretty good buff, you'll have to cough up another $10. And don't get me started on the expansion packs. Later down the line, the game released expansion packs which could be purchased that would include one Skylander, some items, and a special object that when you insert it onto the portal would unlock a whole new level. I won't go into these levels yet, as I'm gonna hold off playing them for one reason that I'll reveal in the next video, but I want you guys to know that this was during the time that content updates and DLCs wasn't that big. Yet Skylanders was one of the first to truly implement this, not only with characters, but with a whole ass level. From what I've seen about the levels, they're actually kind of long, but it's still kind of crazy to think that this was one of the first heavily monetized game through DLC. Now, I know I have been pretty negative throughout this video, but in all honesty, I still enjoyed the game a lot. Despite the massive flaws, there was still something magical about the game that I can't really explain unless you've played it yourself. Something about actually moving the characters in and out of the portal, and the game constantly treating you as a character in the game was honestly one of the most immersive experiences I can remember. The game was still fun even with the few characters I used and not even knowing what the game was even talking about. And technically, if you just care about beating it, you could do that with just the 3 starters if you just kind of lock in. But as painful as it was, there was and still is some beauty in Toys to Life, and it'll be something that I'll always remember and appreciate. However, I do have to say that I think Skylanders was the reason I eventually got into Fortnite, and oh boy, we do not want to talk about that.